tell you something. Being a man ain't no joke.
Toxic masculinity.
Bullying.
The Me Too movement against sex.
Hello, fam. Again, this is Andre from A Christian Male Perspective. Glad to be back. It's been a few weeks. Been traveling with the missus, been having campouts with the family and celebrating anniversaries and birthdays and doing life, as they say, doing life. But today we have a interesting topic. I want to talk with everyone and get everyone's thoughts, feedback, and let's see where the conversation goes. So, we know what next week is. At least I hope most of us know what next week is. For those that don't, it is Father's Day. And I know that Father's Day is not as big of a deal as Mother's Day. And the roles that fathers play is not necessarily viewed the same as the way mother roles are. And they are different. They are very much different. But I believe they are equally important. With that said, today we're going to talk about some lessons that I've learned. Drew and JT may be joining me later. They got some life stuff going on themselves. But I'm going to be talking about some lessons I learned. I've put out a few videos already. Lessons I learned from my father figures, as well as lessons that I've learned being a father for almost 22 years. So love to get your comments, love to get your feedback, to hear you guys' story on your fatherhood. All right. So I've already talked about earlier this week, and I'll recap some of that. For those that don't know, I was not raised by my biological father. I actually didn't meet my biological father until I was in my late 20s, early 30s. There was just family dynamics that happened that didn't allow that to occur. But with that said, when I did meet him, we tried to form a little bit of a bond and a connection. We lived a little bit of ways from each other, but I recognized him and respected him as my father, even though he wasn't able to be a large part of my life. Unfortunately, he passed away just a few years ago. So once I met him, I didn't have him here long. But with that said, God placed other men in my life to act as father figures for me and to help me to grow and to be the man that I am today. Number one, first and foremost, is Lewis Davis. For those that don't know, he was my great uncle, and he was the one who raised me until he passed away at 8 years old. When I think of daddy, when I think of dad, he's the man I think of. Now, for those that don't know, then grew up around me, dad didn't say very much. When he did, it was usually anger and cursing involved in it. That's just the type of man that he was. But one of the things I saw with dad was that until the day he passed away, no one knew his real age, but I think he was around his late 70s, early 80s, like years old. He was getting up every day going to work. He was up every day getting on the tractor, handling his business. I saw him, and I know there were days when he was tired. I know there was days he probably was sick, but he got up every day and went to work. He didn't complain. He didn't fuss. Now, at least in front of us kids. Now, what him and mom did, in the bedroom, I grew up in a 1-bedroom house, so there wasn't a lot of privacy involved in that. So we only had 1 bedroom in the house. Everybody slept in the same bedroom, different beds. That's just the way it was. But I never heard dad fuss. I never heard dad complain about work, complain about hardships in life. And that was something I took to heart. And I tried to embody that in the way that I think, in the way that I live. I try not to complain. Life's not going to be fair. I accepted that growing up. I accepted that as a young age. Life is not going to be fair. And guys, I will tell you, accept it. It's hard because I think especially living in America, we want to think that we want things to be fair. We want things to be equal, but that's not the case. There's going to be someone faster than you. There's going to be someone richer than you. There's going to be someone stronger than you. There's going to be someone higher up the food chain than you. Except for most of us, life is not going to be fair. But what do you do? How do you respond to that? What I saw with dad was that he didn't complain. He did not complain. He worked and worked and worked. And I hopefully a work ethic that he would be proud of. After I got married, before I got married, even after I got married, it was not uncommon for me to work 60 and 80-hour weeks because I wanted to be able to provide for my family like I saw dad provide for us. When dad was living, mom didn't have to work. She worked because she wanted to get out of the house. She didn't have to do that. After dad passed away, mom had to work. And mom was in her, mid to late 70s, so it wasn't the easiest thing for her. But she had to work. When dad passed away when I was 8, there was no other man in the house. So mom had to go to work at that time. So I learned from dad. I learned from my great uncle the value and the principle of work ethic, the value and principle of being, I say the word stoic, not complaining, if that makes sense. So he was probably the first most influential father figure that I had. Number 2 on that list, though he doesn't think about it, was probably my Uncle Ricky. I'll tag him in this video, and I said something about him earlier. Ricky taught me how to be tough, right? He didn't take he didn't take pity on me. He didn't take nothing from me. My uncle was like probably 8, 9 years older than me. So imagine me, dad done passed away, so I'm about 8, 9, 10 years old. You got my Uncle Ricky running around with him and his older friends. I didn't really have a lot of guys my age to play with. So I wanted to hang out and run around with him. Rick didn't take that. He didn't take that. I mean, we got in fights. We got in fights. Yes, I was a bigger kid, but he was older. So it wasn't fair. Again, life's not fair. So we got in fights, and yeah, Ricky taught me how to be tough. He taught me how to, when you get knocked down, are you going to stay there and cry and whimper, or are you going to get back up and face life? And he may not think that, but all those fights and arguments and stuff that we got into, that's what I learned. And that has served me well. That has really served me well because it has bred a sense of toughness and steeliness that when life knocks you down, when things get tough, do you lay on the ground and whimper, or do you get back up and stand up and keep on marching? And that's something that I value my uncle for teaching me. Even though he may not realize it, that's what I learned from him. Number 3, the third father figure in my life was Charles Patrick, Coach Patrick. I talked about him earlier. One of the things, probably the biggest thing I learned from Charles Patrick was to treat people with respect, regardless of who they were and the way they looked. Growing up in Hughes, it was a predominantly black small town, rural town. Um, but Charles Patrick, was a white man. He was our basketball coach. He probably coached football. He eventually probably became principal. He did a lot of stuff around Hughes. But just being honest and truthful with the dynamics, most of the black people, majority of the black people were poor. We worked on farms, worked in the fields. We were poor. It is what it is. And there were some poor white people too. I knew some of those. But many of the white people, they were pretty well off growing up in that area. It is kind of probably what you're thinking about, probably not too far from what you're thinking. But I saw Charles Patrick, and much respect to him. He did not treat us he didn't feel sorry for us. That's probably, when I say that he treated us with respect, he treated us the same, he didn't feel sorry for us. And that's probably the one thing I appreciate. There's many things I appreciate about Coach Patrick, but it's probably one of the things that I appreciate the most. Even though he was a white man, older white man, middle-aged white man, we were young black boys, he didn't treat us like we were victims. He didn't feel sorry for us. And the more and more I think about that, the more and more I appreciate that. I think sometimes, fellas, sometimes we have a tendency to want to look at things that are going wrong in our life and wanting to blame other people. I think sometimes, and I think that's human nature. We don't want to look in the mirror and look and see what are we contributing to our problems? What are we contributing to where we are at this point in our life? And because Coach Patrick didn't treat us with any type of fake sympathy, you what you earned, you got. And because of that, I think it helped brew in me a mentality of overcoming. No matter what the world's going to throw at you, just work hard, and you will get the rewards from that work. You will be respected for your work. And for me, that is something that I've taken with me, especially in my professional career. For those that don't know, I am a consultant. I do work with uh, different corporations, organizations, and there are not a lot of. It's more now, but there is, but especially near my age group, mid 40s, 50s. There's not a lot of black people in consulting. It's just back at a time in the late 80s, in the late 90s, there just wasn't a lot of us going into that field. So I don't find many black men or women around my age in the field. But one of the things I learned from Coach Patrick was you go in, you treat people with respect, you go in, you work hard, you don't look for sympathy, but you prove your work, and you will come out on the top of that. And I respect him for not showing us, like I said, fake sympathy, fake pity, because we were, most of us were poor black boys growing up, in rural Arkansas. I really do appreciate that from him. Don't look at yourself as a victim, if that makes sense. I appreciate Coach Patrick treating us with that level of respect and dignity. Last but not least, someone I didn't get a chance to talk about, but I do want to give honor and mention to, was Gus Malzahn. Now, Gus, for those that don't know, he was an assistant coach at Fayetteville and the Razorbacks, was head coach at Auburn and Arkansas State, and now he's the head coach at University of Central Florida. And I'm thankful to call him a friend. Now, when Gus started coaching, he started coaching football with us. I think I was in the 11th grade. I was 10th or 11th grade when he started coaching. And truth be told, he's only just a few years older than me. I think maybe 7 or 8 years older than me. And for a young man to come in, young white man, again, Gus is white, for a young white man to come in to rural Arkansas with a bunch of poor, poor black boys, and to be able to try to relate to them. He grew up in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Totally different cultures, different dynamics. East Arkansas, West Arkansas, it's just totally different. And for him to come in and to be able to be humble and to relate to us and not try to be snottish or condescending, if you will, that was, I respect him for that. The one of the things I learned from Gus, probably one of the most valuable lessons I learned from Gus, was integrity, right? Especially seeing him go through what happened at the University of Arkansas. I'm not going to get into the politics of that, but seeing what he went through there, even probably some of the stuff that went down at Auburn. Again, I'm not aware of the details of any of that, but to see him, some people say take the high ground. I was in my Bible study. I was listening to another podcast. They talk about being above reproach, and that's something that I learned from Gus. Is the world? I said it before. The world's not going to treat you fair. The world's not going to be kind to you, and that's just something, guys. We have to accept. The world is not going to be kind to us. However, we choose how we respond to the world. When the world is mean, when it is uh, disgusting, when the world is condescending, when the world is not fair, when the world is not treating you right, and you have every right to be angry, how you choose to respond is up to you. I heard one psychologist put it this way: No one can make you do something in your emotions, if that makes sense. No one can make you angry. No one can make you happy. No one can make you sad. You choose how you respond. And I had respect for Gus because, again, the way he came in and treated us with respect as his football players. But my respect leveled up for him, and the lesson I saw, the way he went through those situations and he kept the high ground, the way that he didn't respond in the media and the social media when he was asked questions about the situation, he handled it with grace. And that is something that I try to model in my life. I can't say I always follow it, but I am intentional in trying to strive for it. And the other lesson that I learned from Gus was that keeping God first, even though it may take you a longer route to get somewhere, God honors that. He coming from, Hughes, Arkansas, there's not much there as far as number of people, not a lot of recognition, but keeping God first and having integrity with the way that you work and the way that you approach life, God will exalt you. God will put you in a place, in a sphere, and he will put you in a place where you can actually give him back honor and glory. And I've seen that in my life coming from my beginnings. I'm 100% bought in. And I saw where Gus, his humble beginnings, where he started from to where he is now, and the road he took to get there. It was a long road. It wasn't a quick road. But yeah, that I respect that, and I try to mimic that in my life. Side note, my pastor was talking about the life of Joseph. Joseph went from being put in the pit to being number two in Pharaoh's court, next to Pharaoh himself. That was a long journey. That journey didn't happen just like that. He had Joseph had highs and lows along his journey, but Joseph kept his integrity. He kept his faith in looking towards God, and God honored and respected that. And then God exalted him to where Joseph was able to bring back glory to God through his position. Um, so I see what Gus has walked through, and I see the things he's been through, and yeah, I definitely try to model that in my life. So those are four father figures for me. So now I'm going to just transition over to what I've learned from being a father. My son is 21, about to be 22. Quick fact: our birthdays are on the same day, July 15th. And thank God for that. It helps me in the sense that my wife, she loves celebrating birthdays. I'm not huge when it comes to celebrations, but it gave her the opportunity on that same day to celebrate my son, so I could throw all the attention to him, and I could just kind of go off and do a little something on my own. And she was gracious enough to understand that and do a little something for me on the side, but keep the attention on him. But he's 21, about to be 22. So now, I get her full attention. So I'm thankful for that. I've learned to embrace that. And my daughter, she is 17, just turned 17. So I have a son and a daughter, slightly different stages in life, only 4-5 years apart, but definitely some things that I have learned. So fathers, so take this and hopefully it helps you. Number one, keep doing the good work. There's a verse in the Bible, and I cannot remember the exact verse number, but the paraphrase, it says, don't get tired of doing good. Don't grow weary of doing good. A lot of times I open it up and say, fathers are not necessarily recognized the same as mothers. It's just a fact. If you look at the popular holidays, Mother's Day is way ahead of Father's Day. It is what it is, guys. And it's not to say that it's fair, because I honestly believe, and psychological studies show this out, that it is just as important to have a father in a child's life as it is to have the mother in a child's life. Psychological studies have shown that to be true. Yes, mothers are very, very important. they're a necessity. I would dare say, in the same mouth, in the same breath, that fathers are very, very important. Fathers, you are a necessity. Even if the world doesn't seem to give you the recognition, they don't seem to give you the credit, the honor, you are still necessary. So keep doing the good work. Don't grow weary. You may not necessarily get the recognition on social media. You may not necessarily get the recognition in society, but you are just as important as the mother. You're equally important. So don't take that as a downgrade on the mother, but just recognizing the importance of fathers. So that's the first thing. Don't grow weary of doing good. Number two, be willing, and this is hard for a lot of us guys, but be willing to be vulnerable with your children. And what do I mean by that? A lot of times, guys, we are taught, and we are, even if it's not necessarily ingrained in us, we are taught and trained to be tough. We have to be, right? Because somebody has to be the strong foundation of the family, right? God is the centerpiece. He's the cornerstone on which the family should be built in a Christian family. Guys, you're that floorboarding that God puts in, and to help hold up things, the pillars and stuff, to help hold things, to protect, right? Guys, we're protectors. We're that framing that helps protect the family. And we have to be strong. It's nothing not. We have to be. It's a necessity to be strong. It's a necessity to be tough. But with that being said, let your children, let your wife see the other side of you. They have to be able to communicate and relate in their feelings and in their emotions. Now, it doesn't mean, guys, I'm not saying you have to go and just break down at every twist and turn and things that come up, but be willing to be vulnerable, be willing to communicate and be expressive with your family. Let them see that soft, tender side. One of the ways I did this, again, that stoicism I learned, right? I learned that from dad, and dad never showed to me the soft side. Like I said, all I remember him being angry and cursing and working. um, so I never saw the soft side of my dad. But being able to, through Coach Patrick, through Gus Malzahn, I was able to see that you can be strong, you can be firm, you can be tough, but you can be relatable as well. And honestly, probably when I think about it, probably the best example I saw of it, though it wasn't a real dad, to me, he was after dad passed away, especially before I got in high school and met the other coaches, he was probably the closest thing to a dad, that a role model for a dad that I saw. And that was Bill Cosby, the TV character, not necessarily the person. I'll get twisted. But the way Bill Cosby portrayed being relatable to his kids on TV was something I tried to model with my children. He had scripts and they had ways the kids were supposed to respond. So it was TV. It is what it is. It's kind of like with Disney princesses, Disney fairy tales. Life doesn't necessarily work that way. But I tried to model, yes, being firm, being tough, being demanding, but also being relatable, being vulnerable. I wanted my kids to know that I was human, right? That I wasn't just some angry man that just all he did was work all the time. When he came home, he was just demanding and angry. I didn't want them to think that's all there was to being a father. And fellas, one of the reasons why I say that is because many times the way that you relate to your kids, as imperfect as we are, many times the way we relate to our kids will be the way that our children relate to God. They see us as a heavenly father, as a reflection And they see us as their earthly father as a reflection of their heavenly father. Yes, I know that's hard. That's hard to accept. And my son, if you're listening, I hope I did a at least a somewhat decent job. I'm not going to say respectable, but at least a somewhat decent job in trying to reflect God's love, God's desires for you. And I pray that you do that even better too for your children, for your wife. That you reflect God's love, God's grace, God's, authority when needed, even better than I did. But fellas, be vulnerable with your children. Let them see that soft side. And you may not. It may seem uncomfortable at first. And again, I'm not saying go and throw it out there every time and place. But let them know that there is a soft side. Wrestle with your kids. I know my kids loved it. We wrestled for a long time, and to a certain point still do, Let them see, let play with your kids and let them see the fun side. I know a lot of times we have to work, guys. We have to carry heavy loads. And carrying heavy loads, and like we have our Atlas moments. We got to put the world as single on our shoulders and walk. But let them see those loving and caring moments as well. Number 3, right? We talked about, we talked about being relatable. So yes, we just talked about being, relatable. Um, Next thing, guys, a lesson that I've learned is to always show up. So what do I mean by showing up? If you're going to say you're going to do something, everything in your power, do it. If it's at all possible, do it. Why? Because you're building trust with your children. I know earlier, and when my kids were young, I would tell them, hey, we're going to go do this or we're going to go do that. And then for me, it was work. I would let work get in the way. And I ended up breaking promises and commitments to my children and to my wife because I was so focused on working and providing that I didn't always show up. And that could lead to children saying, is dad going to be there this time? Is dad going to keep his word this time? Even if you show up sometimes, if you miss often enough, you plant this kind of seed of doubt in your children. And it takes a long time to work past that. In marriage counseling, something, me and my wife, we was something things we listened to. One of the things that we heard was that for every one bad argument that you have or one mistake that you made is blatantly yours, right? You messed up. It could take a minimum of 5 good deeds to help make up for that one bad. So that means that if you miss one, you end up having to flake out on one commitment, one thing you said. It may take 2, 3, 4, 5 good deeds to erase that one bad in your children's mind or even in your wife's mind. So guys, if you're going to say you're going to do something, do everything in your power to show up, right? Show up. Keep your word. And I keep going back to God because he keeps his promises. He is faithful. And we as earthly fathers are a reflection of him. So in the same way, we should try with everything in our power to keep our word, to keep our promises. So those are 3 things that I've learned as a father, 20, almost 22 years. Prayerfully, God bless me with 22 more. I will continue to learn those things, and given God's grace, I will continue to share the things that I've learned along the way. All right. I hope this has been beneficial. I hope this has been helpful. This is Andre from a Christian male perspective. We're going to be taking off next week, of course, to celebrate Father's Day. But we should be joining back shortly after that with new topics, new ideas. Feel free to leave a like on Facebook or YouTube and a subscription if you're on YouTube. Feel free to subscribe. We'll be putting out shorts here shortly. We're going to start putting out shorts, just little tidbits of lessons learned, life advice, things that we've experiences that we've been through. But yeah, this is Andre from a Christian male perspective. Stay sharp.